Welcome to the Counselling Tutor podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to the Counselor Tutor podcast with me, Rory Lees Oakes, and as always with me, my fellow therapist and skills master himself, Mr. Ken Kelly.
Oh, it's so great to be back here. It's good to see you again, Rory. I just want to give everybody a bit of a behind-the-scenes view of what actually goes on here. When you listen to this, it probably sounds like Rory and I sitting in the same room together, but we're not. We're connecting via the technology of Skype, and we're a good few miles away from one another. So it's always a pleasure to catch up and see Rory and do these kind of little talks for you guys. And it looks like it's hitting the mark. Episode 3, we kind of hit the 4,000 mark download there. We've got 18 5-star reviews from you guys, so we're so very, very grateful. You really have shown us that this is valuable for you, so great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's I'm getting lots of emails. We're getting lots of comments on the Facebook feed, and if you want to join our Facebook community, if you go to www.counsellingtutor.com. Remember, there's 2 L's in counselling. It's spelt the English, not the American way. And on the top right-hand tab, there is a tab that says Facebook. And if you click on that, it's a closed group. You just ask to join. We let you in, and you can join a whole host of people. Some people who are students, some people who are qualified counsellors. There's tutors in there. And you can discuss the wonderful world of counselling. So if you're in training, it's just a great place to get support for your assignments, or just to chat about theory and meet other students and people in the world of counselling.
And it's a very valuable place to hang out. It's where we kind of take ideas and topics for the podcasts that we bring to you, because this is not about us having a yabba. It's about us meeting your needs, your requirements. That's what we're here for. And today, I think this came in from an email for your good self, Rory. You got an email, and that's influenced today's topic.
It is, and it's an email. So I'm only going to use a letter L, because the person has sent an email to me. So it wasn't on the Facebook feed, so not everybody could see it. But it's around personal development groups, sometimes called process groups. And the subtext of the letter is, what are they all about? What should we be doing? And how actually did they work? And also, in the letter, there was just a slight frustration about how other people were using that space. And we're going to look at that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about process groups. Ken and myself are going to talk about process groups, what their point is, and I guess explore the discomfort that sometimes can come from them.
Yeah, and also in today's episode, after we've had a chat of that personal development side, I guess, of what we do as practitioners, Rory's going to be heading up Theory with Rory, and I believe today you're going to be looking at, or dare I say it, a critique of Rogers, a critique of Mr. Carl Rogers himself. Now, I'm very partial to Mr. Carl Rogers because I'm a person-centered therapist, but I also recognize that not everything is roses, and that there needs to be a critique. We need to look at both sides, I guess, of the argument. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then running into skills today, I'm going to be having a look at what is known as idiosyncratic empathy. So that's a lot of fun. We're going to be checking that out in skills today.
Yes, and that's a really useful skills to have, idiosyncratic empathy. And it's really important that when we're working with clients, that we're tailoring our responses to them, not just being an off-the-shelf set of responses that feels like this, that could feel like that. We're actually really understanding them, really in their frame of reference, and really reflecting back to them, a skill I know that you've covered in a recent podcast, Ken, really reflecting back to them their phenomenological view of the world. In other words, so they're really hearing their own words. And in empathy, that tailored empathy, which is idiosyncratic empathy.
Oh, I just love the way that you describe that. I'm excited to hear my own skills session now. But we kick off as kind of we indicated. We're going to be looking at process groups. I guess Rogers called them encounter groups, and they were slightly different towards the end of his work. And I know, Rory, this was a particular interest of you because we know Carl Rogers for being the founder of the person-centered approach to counselling. But towards the end of his career, I guess he kind of left that behind slightly and went more into doing encounter groups, which is almost like the kind of groups that we can expect to see in our counselling training, what you might call a process group or a PD group, a personal development group. But can you tell us a little bit more about those encounter groups? Because I know it's fascinating stuff, and I know that it resulted in quite a prestigious nomination, Rory.
It did. Rogers got an interest in metaphysics towards the end of his life, and metaphysics is the physics that you can't measure very easily. So if you drop a pencil, if you're at home now, get yourself a pencil or something that's to hand, not a hot cup of tea, yeah? Don't be dropping that stuff. And just drop it onto the table, onto the floor. If you've got a tissue or something, just drop it and it'll fall to the floor. And that's because we've got gravity. And the thing is, that is physics. You know, we all agree on the law of gravity. But try measuring love. Try measuring how much we enjoy something. Yeah. That is a tricky one. And that is the world of metaphysics. That is not easily measured. And Rogers got really interested towards the end of his life in encounter groups. And he was actually nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. He travelled around the world. He went to Beirut, where there was lots of war and factions fighting. And he brought those opposing people together to try and talk through their issues in a person-centered way. He did it in Northern Ireland, and he really did found or develop the idea of process groups. Now, sometimes those are known in training as personal development groups, where we sit in a circle and everybody gets to know what everybody's shoes they're wearing for a whole hour.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you say that, because you end up looking at the floor a lot, and it's interesting because I look back at my training and it was almost want to say the most valuable thing I took away from my training. It was so special. My PD group, it was a really special place to be. It was safe. It mirrored the counselling relationship in that the core conditions were present within that group. And our group, right at the very beginning, and I'm going to say again, I've mentioned before that you were my tutor at this time, Rory, but you led this group, but you led it in a truly person-centered way, in that you didn't lead it, you were just sat there within it. And when you set the group set the kind of boundaries of the group was that it wasn't a place for a discussion. It wasn't a bit of a chat after we'd done skills work or we'd looked at the theory. It was a place where you brought where you were at. And you listened to other people, and you listened empathically to where they were at. It wasn't then about giving them advice of what they should do or what they shouldn't do, or drilling down and drilling into what it is that they're bringing by asking them questions and trying to get in there. It was really reflected the counselling process, where it wasn't about asking questions. It was just about trying to gain an understanding. It was a really special place, not just for me, but for my peers as well. I know they shared that, and there was tremendous growth. And when I finished studying, I remember missing it terribly, looking around, trying to replace that. And to date, I haven't managed to replace that. The closest I got was when I came and worked as a tutor with you, Rory, and I got to share a PD group with my learners. And again, it became a special place. But I have heard people struggle with PD groups.
And indeed, Ken. And in this letter, the email that I received, the person who's writing said, "We've had challenging times and conflict too, which feels difficult." And then she goes on to say that she's often frustrated with people talking in the we and being overly positive or brushing things off. And I'm going to share, I can see Ken on my screen smiling and nodding, because as tutors we experience this a lot. And I'm going to share something from my PD group, which was over 15 years ago now. I can remember being in my PD group when I was at Tameside College and feeling incredibly frustrated with with this lack of depth. It was surface information. There wasn't. I felt I wasn't getting anything, and I voiced that in the group. And one of my peers said, "You know, Rory, when I'm sitting in this group, I'm worried about what's going on at home. I'm not here. I'm there." And she went on to talk about which I won't discuss, but quite a difficult situation that was going on at home. And it just goes to prove that sometimes when people are using the we, or they're brushing things off, that maybe they're not ready to share where they're at. And isn't that just how it is in client work, Ken?
Oh, so much so. And, you know, it's called, one of the names for the group is PD group, which is personal development. Personal refers to you. It refers to you that's listening to this. It doesn't refer to everyone else in the group. It's your personal development group. You go into that group for you. It's also called process group. It's process for you. It's where you go to process. So if you're sat in that group and feelings are coming up within you because somebody else has said or done something, I would be looking to self and saying, why am I feeling that? Why does this come up in me when that person does that? Because, hey ho, we don't have any control over other people, only ourselves. We're there to look at ourselves. This is personal development of self. You're not there to personally grow the rest of the group. You're just there for you. You are part of the group, and that is magical and wonderful. But when somebody says something and that really gets to you and that makes you angry, it's not them, it's you. Have a look within and use that time to process why, when that person says that, do I choose to have this reaction? Because within that is the growth of the PD group.
Oh, absolutely, Ken. And how many times as facilitators have we turned to our learners, our students who've said, you know, one to another, you're making me feel really angry. And as a facilitator, you say, if I could reflect that, maybe you're making yourself feel angry, you know, and also working with the transference and counter transference. You know, I as I've developed my teaching practice more, I'm more able to see that within a process group, and people realizing that maybe where they're getting frustrated or angry, the person they're getting angry with may have a facet of a past relationship. And I've talked about this in last week's podcast about transference and counter-transference. So they're really important. And they're also a little bit of a pressure cooker. The way we structure our courses, and all courses are different, is that we have the theory. We deliver the theory and people kind of do work around the theory and a lesson around the theory. Then we have professional discussion group, where we talk about how that's been applied maybe in a counselling environment when they're in practice, you know, when students are in practice. Then we have a skills group, so people can develop skills and test the skills out. And at the end of that, we have the process group, and that is really it's a little bit like a safety valve. So that if there's anything come up along those three sections, that they can voice it. And really, I think that these groups should be about protection, but not about avoidance.
Yeah. And you're speaking about taking what maybe you've got from the day's learning into that process group. And if you're talking about skills, you know, you can practice your skills within that group. You can practice your way of being, for sure. You can listen instead of when someone's talking, thinking about what you might say next. You can be there with them in their frame of reference, whatever it is that they may be bringing. And if the person brings stuff up for you and you find them maybe more challenging or more difficult, then all the more reason to practice that skill of being unconditional positive regard towards that person and being in their frame of reference. Because here's the reality. When you step out into practice, into that real world, you don't know who's going to walk through that door and sit in that chair. And there will be, I can tell you for a fact, there will be people that will maybe, people that you wouldn't normally go out and make relationships with and make friendships with. In the same way as you're going to maybe meet more challenging people within your PD group, within the course, you're going to meet them out counselling as well. So within your PD group, Practice unconditional positive regard. Practice that empathic listening and really being and hearing what it is that they're saying. Be there, and what a great place, what great learning.
Absolutely, Ken. And one of the things that I learned during my training, and I'm sure there's lots of you out there that this is really relevant for you, is that not everybody's like you. Just because we're all training to be therapists, or you're all trained to be therapists, doesn't mean that everybody has the same views. You're going to have different political views. You're going to have different views on a whole host of things, and that reflects how your clients will be. And what I would say is that if you're finding it difficult in PD group, one of the greatest things that I hear on a regular basis is I am feeling. Someone in a group say, this is a feeling that's coming up within me, and it might be a feeling that's active in their frame of reference. So it could be pre-symbolized. In other words, they're not sure what it relates to. That's pre-symbolized. They're not sure what it relates to, but by using the group and the core conditions in the group, you can develop that understanding of yourself, and that's the great thing I think about counselling training. Coming away not only with the skills and the theory and all the other stuff that's definitely needed in counselling, but also that understanding of self. Because self is the thing that's going to be sitting in the room with the client.
Couldn't agree more. Really couldn't agree more. And just one final thought on PD groups before we go into that critique of Rogers, which I'm really looking forward to, Rory. And that is, it's a great place to practice courage. You know, if you've got something going on, something that you don't feel is right, if there's a fraction, if you feel that there's... say it. You know, it may well be when you go out into practice that you're working in an agency and you're feeling, oh, this is not working as I want it to be. This is not right within this agency. That I'm really struggling with that. You're going to need the courage to stand up and say, this is how it is. The PD group is a safe place to bring whatever you need to bring. And as Rory was just saying now, if you link that back to how you are feeling, as opposed to you said or you did, that is external, saying, I feel. Nobody can argue, I feel, because it's how you feel. Bring your feelings, bring your difficult feelings into PD group. You'll be surprised.
Absolutely. And as I say to my learners on a regular basis, I'm a great fan of the late Maya Angelou, who was just a wonderful writer. Without courage, you cannot practice any other virtue consistently. So without courage, first and foremost, you can't be loving, you can't be just, you can't be kind, because courage links into all of those. And courage is as she explains it, is a bit like a muscle, and sometimes you've got to exercise it. Yeah. And there's no better place to exercise it and develop it in the metaphysical gym, so to speak, of a PD group.
Agreed. And there's nothing better to top that off. That is just the perfect quote to lay that topic down. And I encourage you to take this topic into your own PD group. If you want to do yourself a big favor, go and have a look on YouTube and find a video of Rogers leading an encounter group or a PD group. Go and have a look. Go into your PD group. Go and speak about it. Your PD group is a really special place. If you're unhappy in it, or you're feeling that it's tough for you, do something about it. It's your PD group. It's there for you to process. So popping that one side, you go and talk about that with your peers. We're moving on now to Theory with Rory, and we're going to be looking at that critique of Rogers.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees Oakes.
Over the years, client-centred therapy, sometimes referred to as the person-centred approach, has come in for some criticisms. We're going to explore some criticisms, which includes a new one that frankly is new to me. The first is what could be classified as a sociological critique, the idea that the very roots of person-centred therapy are founded in a specific country and, more to the point, gain prominence in a specific period in history. To quote a passage from the book Restless Nation, the author, James M. Jasper, points out the stark contrast between the European and American psyche in this quote. One historian of psychotherapy compares European pessimism about the interior self with American optimism. The European cure was to control through the practices of self-domination. The American cure was to control by revitalizing the self through practices of self-liberation. Even the American unconscious was good. America in the 1950s and 60s was a nation of unparalleled economic growth, untouched structurally by World War II. The factories that built military equipment for the war effort now produce consumer goods. From cars to dishwashers, the economy boomed. This huge surge in optimism gave rise to the term the American dream, the belief that with hard work anyone could do anything. In this sociological environment, Rogers' ideas of self-actualization, organismic self-valuing and humanistic psychology, a term coined by Abraham Maslow, found a willing audience. Contrast this with war-ravaged Europe, towns and infrastructure destroyed, the economy in tatters. It's also worth observing that in Europe, the dominant ideas on the human psyche were Sigmund Freud's, who saw the human condition in what could be described as a both pessimistic and self-destructive view. This leads to the second sociological critique of Rogers, his idea of the human personality having a tendency to be basically good. His critics point out, if this was the case, how come millions of people were murdered by seemingly ordinary people during the atrocities in concentration camps across Nazi-occupied Europe? Are humans basically good, as Rogers hypothesised? The second argument against Rogers' ideas is the notion that the core conditions being necessary and sufficient for change to occur may not be true in some client presentations. Treating some forms of depression or historic issues generated from childhood experiences such as abuse or abandonment may need a more structured therapeutic approach. People in recovery from substance abuse may also need a more structured form of therapy, which includes tasks and goal-setting strategies. Some people who have psychopathic personalities may not sense at any level the warmth of the therapist. Clients also may not want to be passive recipients of therapy, but want to take a more active role in their recovery by being taught psychological techniques or completing homework tasks between sessions. One of the most popular criticisms is referred to as the Masson critique. In 1990, Jeffrey Masson, PhD, a former psychotherapist, published a book entitled Against Therapy. In it, he critiqued all the main schools of therapy. In a chapter entitled The Problem with Benevolence, Masson turns his attention to the work of Carl Rogers. He wrote, "What guarantee is there? What guarantee could there possibly be that any therapist is genuine person Roger posits him to be? The unconditional positive regard that Rogers wants the therapist to feel is something that cannot be legislated into existence any more than can love. Unconditional positive regard is not something that seems either likely or desirable." In other words, the way of being encapsulated in how the therapist offers the client the conditions of empathy, congruence and unconditional positive regard is no more than a professional facade, an act put on for the therapy to work. Finally, a criticism that was new to me was posted on the Facebook group page by Diane, who is a contributor, so thank you, Diane. And I will refer to this critique as a theological perspective. It is written by Father Brian Bartley, and he's a priest in the Diocese of Toronto. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Toronto in political science and sociology, and he wrote an essay in which he states that, according to Stanton and Buteman, the philosophical presuppositions underlying person-centered therapy ought to raise a number of concerns for the Christian. First of all, it is assumed that we are ultimately force and sole masters of our own destiny. All authority is within. They emphasise that according to our faith, the self is not all there and it should not be the centre of what it is. In the Christian tradition, they say to proclaim oneself to be in control of one's existence is the ultimate act of rebellion. So, just reading that, it kind of makes a sense that I get that the ideas of self-actualization, of the organismic valuing process, of someone thinking that they are the masters of their own destiny may, and I say may because I'm not a theologian, bump against traditions, maybe not only of the Christian faith, but of other faith positions as well. I don't know, what do you think? It'd be interesting to get some feedback on the Facebook feed on this idea. As we come to the end of this discussion, it is worth remembering that despite these criticisms, Roger's work is still considered a relevant and effective therapy. This is backed up by numerous research studies. It also forms the building of a trusting, safe relationship with clients in more active directive therapies, such as cognitive behavioural therapy or transactional analysis, where a more structured approach is needed or sometimes requested by the clients. And I sometimes say to my learners that in CBT or transactional analysis or a number of other therapies that use a model, the core conditions may be necessary but not sufficient. Hence, the model provides the platform for the therapy to work. In person-centered therapy, the idea is that the conditions are necessary and sufficient. You offer the empathy, the congruence, and the unconditional positive regard. And by definition of these being offered, and the client understanding, receiving them, and feeling that non-judgmental attitude, Roger's called it prizing, that it would start the organismic valuing process, rid them of the conditions of worth, and they could start working from what we call an internal locus of evaluation.
Really good information there. Such deep learning. And here's the thing, if you're a student of counselling, you're going to be asked to do a critique of the main models. It just is. So there's something there for your assignments. Re-listen to it, pen and paper in hand, and take down some notes there, because really worthwhile stuff. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Rory.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And remember, don't forget the show notes. So if you go to www.counsellingtutor.com, 2 L's in counselling, it's not the American spelling. If you go into the show notes, I'll put some information there and some references that you can use in your assignments. So, Ken, what are we going to be looking at today in skills?
Counselling Skills with Ken Kelly.
In today's skills session, I want to speak about empathy, and in particular, idiosyncratic empathy. We'll get to the meaning of that in just a moment. Firstly, I need to recognize that empathy is not a skill. It's not a skill that we bring as counselors. It is more a way of being. However, it is so important because it underpins the skills that we might bring. So we've looked at maybe the skill of reflection, maybe the skill of paraphrasing, the skill of non-verbal communication. All of this is worthless unless you have empathy running through it. So Carl Ransom Rogers, specifically for the person-centered approach to counseling, recognized empathy as being necessary within the therapeutic relationship to bring about psychological contact. And it doesn't matter which approach or model of counseling you look to, empathy is going to be part of that. Even if you look to the more psychodynamic, psychoanalytical forms of therapy, today, more and more, they're moving into the recognition that empathy and the relationship with the client and the client feeling that they've been understood and heard is really important. So, what is empathy? If we were to look, I guess, at a textbook definition for empathy, it would be us as a counsellor seeing the client's world as they see it. So I guess from their frame of reference. And the empathy circle is only complete when we are able to report that back or communicate that back in such a way that the client understands that we've kind of seen it that way. It's when the client goes, yes, this person gets me, that we have an empathic connection that has been formed, that empathic bond that takes our relationship with that client to that deep level. They are being heard. You get them. So we're basically speaking about perception, We, as the counsellor, need to perceive what it is that the client is bringing, and communication. We need to be able to communicate that back in a way that that client feels that they've been understood. So perception without the communication is useless, and it is not empathy. So an example I've used before of this, and I'll bring it again, is you may well be reading a book that is emotional, or you may be watching a movie that is an emotional, and you're very wrapped up in what the character is doing, and you may feel emotions towards that character, a really strong bond. So that is your perception. You're able to perceive that, but you're not able to communicate that to the actor or the person in the book. So the empathy cycle is not complete within that transaction. So what is idiosyncratic empathy? Well, first let's take the word idiosyncratic. So idiosyncratic is kind of defined as relating to the individual. In other words, idiosyncratic is individualistic. It will be different in different circumstances. So idiosyncratic empathy is the empathy will be different depending on the person that you are working with. If you are in the person's frame of reference, if you're really seeing it how they see it, then it's going to be individual for each and every different client. So the term idiosyncratic empathy was first coined, I guess, by Gerald D. Bozarth. He recognized that empathy was good, but idiosyncratic empathy was really needed. That empathy needed to be different depending on what the client was bringing, who they were, and what their frame of reference was. So now that we've looked at kind of a definition, a textbook definition of empathy and idiosyncratic empathy, let's now rewind back and take a deeper look at empathy itself. Firstly, empathy is not about you, the counsellor, getting it right. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to be in your frame of reference and I'm trying to get it right. It's not about you getting it right or wrong. It's just almost melting yourself into that client's frame of reference and fully being with them. In order to do this, we need to look at our own self-concept and know who we are as individuals. Recognize that we bring our self-concept into that counseling relationship. So what is our self-concept? It's the truths that we hold in life. It's everything that we believe. It's that is rooted in our culture, in our childhood, in our belief structure, in our race, in our sexuality. All of that forms the way that we look at the world. So we look at the world not as the world is, but as we as individuals are. And that is our self-concept. It is the structure of self that we, I guess, project out on everything that we look at. Part of counseling training is personal development. It's looking within. You may be familiar with the Johari window exercise. Certain things are unseen to us and they may be seen by others. And part of the counseling journey, specifically in PD groups, may be those unseen to us elements of our personality, those maybe not for growth elements of our personality, coming into our awareness and challenging us to look at them. It's about us examining our self-concept, examining that we know is true, and readjusting that to be able to be there fully with a client, not in our frame of reference, looking at their material through our eyes, but trying as best we can to see it through their eyes. So I'll give you an example. An example of this may well be a client sitting with a counsellor, and the client may say something along the lines of, I'm devastated, I'm so disgusted in myself, I'm so terribly overweight. When I look in the mirror, I look and I just see this ugly, fat person. That's tough material. That's a hurt person who's in a really difficult place. How, hearing that, would you respond to that in an empathic way, being in that client's frame of reference? There's almost a temptation to maybe put in there, well, I hear that's what you bring, but that's certainly not what I see in front of me here today. That might be one response that a counsellor might be kind of tempted to bring in that kind of situation. But what is that? Whose frame of reference is it? If I say to that client, I hear what you're saying, but that's not what I see. I see a beautiful individual in front of me. I'm 100% in my own frame of reference. I'm basically saying to that client, no, you're wrong. What you're perceiving and what you're seeing is not right. Let me tell you what I see here. And that is really not empathic. That is not being in the client's frame of reference. And that client will certainly not feel heard. They may feel rescued, like I've thrown them a life preserver, but they're not going to feel heard. They're not going to feel validated. So it's about reflecting back in a way that they do feel heard. And maybe the correct response in that situation that would be more empathic might be something along the lines of, wow, that sounds so terribly destroying for you that when you look in the mirror, you just see this fat person that you basically can't stand. And I recognize that that is you. That's certainly not rescuing the client. That's certainly empathic. That's certainly in their frame of reference. We're not rescuing them. We're not trying to take them away from the pain of what they feel towards their own self. We're just understanding it. And that's what it's about. That's what empathy is about. As soon as we find ourselves asking questions for any reason other than to clarify our full understanding of that client's frame of reference, we're in our frame of reference. We're on our agenda, and we break that empathy. We're now saying to the client, hey, well, what happens if you do this? And what about that? And what about the next thing? And yeah, but have you tried this? That is not within the client's frame of reference, and it is certainly not empathic. And if we were operating as a person-centered counselor, we would be avoiding asking any questions that were not based on us clarifying our understanding. So there's an example maybe of empathy within the real world and how that may play out, and the cycle being complete of what the client brings, how we perceive that, how we understand that. So it's not about us being right. It's just about us being fully integrated within the client's frame of reference and putting aside that is our self-concept just for that moment, to be with them, and then to reflect that back in such a way that that client goes, yes, you hear me. Part of being empathic is having a vocabulary to be able to describe what it is that we perceive that a client is bringing. So if we're picking up and being empathically connected to a client, how can we put that in words that we can feed that back to the client? Now, the interesting thing is there are so many different words. They say that the Inuits have so many different words for snow. I don't know how true that is because I don't have a full understanding of that culture. But one thing I do know is that very often we as human beings have very few words for our emotions. You know, we can say happy, sad, angry. They seem to be very basic words connected to these emotions. Part of being reflective is looking inside and looking at our own emotions and getting words to be able to describe them. And this is best done by processing your day and maybe journaling. And as you're journaling, thinking what word really fits with this. Because if we can find words to describe our emotions and feelings, maybe we can use those words and try those words within a counseling relationship to reflect back our understanding of what a client is bringing. And we may find that we have a resonance, that we put in a word that they go, wow, yeah, wow, that's the word. That's exactly it. If you're interested, I've compiled a list of feeling words, and you can download that just by going to the show notes of today's episode. So that is counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, go through to episode number 5, and it's right there at the top. You can just click on that and download it, and it's a list of all different feeling words that you can have a look and maybe see if they resonate with you, and you can try them with your clients. It just, I guess, expands our vocabulary. An example may be a client who brings that they've just been laid off from their job. They may be really angry about that, and they say, they're so angry. They laid me off from my job. But you're looking at this client and you're noticing that their hands are clenching. You're noticing their teeth are clenching as they speak to you. You notice that their muscles in their neck are tensing up as they speak to you. And I wonder, Is angry the right word for that? How about furious? Is that maybe stronger? So it's about having a vocab that kind of turns the dial from mildly irritated right through to absolutely furious. As you're saying the word back to the client that you kind of feel, how do you say it back? Do you kind of calmly sit there and say, you know, you look absolutely furious as you're saying that? Or do you yourself kind of grip your hands and kind of clench your teeth and say, wow, you're furious as you're saying that? And you kind of put the feeling of what you're perceiving from the client into the words that you feed back. This is idiosyncratic empathy. It's empathy that is in motion. It's happening right there and then within those moments. So looking at those words, really, really important to gain your vocabulary to be able to, I guess, interpret what the client is bringing and add words to unnamed feelings. So idiosyncratic empathy is taking that maybe to the deeper level. And I guess empathy, by the very nature of what it is and how it works, is idiosyncratic. Idiosyncratic empathy means that with one client, you may find yourself laughing, that the tears roll down your cheeks within that counselling session. And that's fine. That's fine if that's where the client was and that's what they were bringing on that day, and that's where you found yourself. You were empathic, you were with that client where they were, and if they were bringing things full of joy and laughter and fun, you may find yourself laughing with them. The next client, you may find yourself in a very different place. So I guess by the nature of empathy, it is idiosyncratic. So there's an explanation, maybe a deeper understanding of empathy, idiosyncratic empathy. Maybe it's something that you can take into your next skills session and see the empathy not as just being a one word that fits all. Bang, I am exercising empathic understanding here. Maybe you can see it as something that is ever-changing, that is liquid, that is as individual as you are, and as individual as the clients that you will have the pleasure, the privilege, I guess is a better word, of counselling and being with them on their journey. Go into your skills sessions and look how idiosyncratic that empathy is. If you're merely rattling off the words, merely reflecting back the words they gave, is that really an empathic connection? Are we looking deeper than that? Are we looking to the person? Are we recognizing their body language? Are we recognizing the pattern of the speech that they bring? Are we recognizing where their eyes are? They're making eye contact. Are they looking at the floor? What are they doing with their hands? Are they ringing with their hands? We are empathically with the whole person, not just the words that they bring. We look way beyond the words to the person that is there bringing those words. Have a chat with your peers about what empathy means to them. Explain what it means to you. Get their differing opinions. Look at the idiosyncrasies of empathy and how that changes and differs from client to client when you're doing simulated skills. If you work with one of your peers and work with another one of your peers, how different is that empathy within that relationship? I really do hope that was helpful for you. And remember, you can get that list of feeling words that you can download from the website. Just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, and you'll be able to download that, a whole list of different words to describe different feelings and emotions to improve your vocabulary and words that you can share to create resonance and deepen the empathic bond between you and your clients.
Wasn't that just a great introduction to working with idiosyncratic empathy? So different, isn't it, just to doing counselling skills, and really, really important that the client is not just the content of what the client's saying is reflected back, but also the meaning of it. Yeah. And that really is the kind of essence of idiosyncratic empathy.
So looking now at Ask Ken and Rory, and there's been kind of a little thread going for some time now, and Rory and I have been dancing around saying, do we jump in? And the reason that we didn't just dive into this is because it might not suit everybody. It's questions about a placement. Now, here's the thing. When you study in counselling, there's a period of time that you need to go into placement. And placement, for those who maybe are not familiar with it, is where you go and you practice your counselling skills. You're in live practice, but you're supported. You're supported by the college or your learning institution. You're supported by a supervisor, and you are supported by, I guess, your peers, by professional discussion. So it's kind of supported practice. And it can be tricky. It can be tricky finding a placement. It can be tricky going into placement and finding that everything you learnt in class is not reflected in the agency you work in, and it's frustrated because you're now hitting the real world. So we thought we'd just have a bit of a discussion on that.
Absolutely. And I think the first thing is finding a placement, knowing which placement to go for. And as I always say to my learners, Ken, and I know you've heard me say it, and I think you've said it yourself, don't just go for any old placement that will give you the counselling hours. I think that is incredibly dangerous. Find a placement that has some meaning for you. It might be that you're counselling because of your own history, and I know I've talked about the wounded healer in one of the podcasts that we've recently produced. But find a placement that suits you, not just one that you can get your hours in. And the reason for that is that it has to be meaningful. You know, helping people has to be a meaningful occupation. It's not, your placement shouldn't be a means to an end. You know, yes, you want your counselling hours in. Yes, you want that section of the study boxed off and signed off, but it should be meaningful. And if you're in a placement where you're not enjoying it, you'll reflect that onto your clients. Absolutely.
And you'll soon recognise that when you're in a non-supported environment. So what Rory's saying there is, it's really important to get a placement because you do have to get the hours, but it's more important to get the right placement. It really is. And it's not that easy to change placements once you're in there, because you may have a client load. You don't want to be letting your clients down. So here's the thing. Any good organisation offering a placement should have some form of interview process. Here's the secret here. This is not them interviewing you. It's you having the opportunity to go and interview them. So when you've got that interview, don't be all nervous and think, wow, I hope I say the right things. Be mindful and say, I hope they say the right things to meet my requirements of having a good and supported placement opportunity. So what might we look at in a good placement, Rory? What's the kind of stuff that we should have a look out for?
Well, I think that the first thing should be that you're feeling the core conditions. You know, we talk a lot about the core conditions in therapy, and I think that should be echoed and visible in the placements. So the first thing is, how does it feel? You know, and if you're going to a placement, if you're sitting there, how are the people with you? What's the vibe around the place? You know, speak with your peers, speak with your tutors, gain some insight about how they feel. It may be you may see some second year students who are already there. If you can, ask them, grab them for a coffee or a glass of water. You know, have a chat with them. The second thing I would say is that you need to be mindful that as a student, you're going to be seeing filtered clients. In other words, somebody with more experience is going to be doing the assessments, hopefully, and they're going to be separating out those people with really serious difficulties in their life with difficulties that are suitable for a student. So you shouldn't be having very, very heavy duty clients. Having said that, sometimes what's said at the process of being of having clients allocated to student therapists, what's said at the kind of interview phase where they're being assessed and what they actually say in the therapy with clients is two different things. So sometimes they can talk about, you know, I'm very sad I've got a loss, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're talking about stuff other than that, and that can become a need for more support. Things around historic abuse, ongoing situations where someone's in an abusive relationship, that might mean that you need more support. So there should be, so the first piece of advice I'd give in this section is you really need a placement, and the BACP say this, where there is a therapist attached to the practice.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And ask, what is the assessment process? So you're now at this interview. Say, if I was to be successful and you were to give me this placement, how are the clients assessed that I will be seeing? What is the process that you follow? And make sure you're happy with that. And ask that follow-on question. If you've assessed a client as being fit for me to see them, and when I'm working with them, I find they may be presenting with material that I don't feel confident in dealing with, what do I do? What support have I got? And they should be able to answer those questions really quickly, without thinking, without missing a beat. This should be that they should have thought about this long before. They should have gone through this process many times before. They should know exactly what to do in that situation and see, does that feel right for you?
Absolutely, Ken. The other thing is I'd like to talk about in-house supervision. A lot of placements now are running models where you go as a student to practice your therapy, you have to have their supervision. Now, I spoke with the BACP about 18 months ago, and they said there isn't a problem with this. What I would say is if you're going for a placement and the supervision's included, and when I say included, which means you have to pay for it, yeah, meet the supervisor and be absolutely sure that you can work with them. Because if you get into 20 hours or 30 hours and you think, I can't work with this supervisor, I'm not getting enough, or I'm not feeling supported enough, then you've got a very difficult situation where you're going to have their supervision to keep the placement and get an external supervisor, so you could possibly be paying double supervision. Then what you'd have to do is work out who's going to sign your log off at the end of your 100 hours or 200 hours, whatever your course asks.
Yeah.
So if it is built-in supervision, and a lot of placements are doing this now, be very mindful of who your supervisor is going to be.
In the same way as you would expect that a client looking to go into counselling might have some choice. They may want to see a female counsellor or a male counsellor or a counsellor of a certain modality. The same is true for your supervision when you are in placement. You should have a choice. And if you're working or looking at a placement in an organisation where they're saying, take it or leave it, you have our supervision or that's it, I would be considering that very, very carefully and wondering if that was a match for me. Because it can be really frustrating, as Rory's just kind of alluded to a couple of the frustrations that can come up in that situation. Your supervision during placement is vital. It's another avenue of rich learning and support for you as a placement counsellor. And I believe in the new BACP ethical framework, which will be coming live in, is it June of 2016? I think that they've really looked at this and they're starting to recognize this in-house supervision is maybe not the way to go. So take that under advisement. It's your practice from the very first day you walk in and sit in front of a client. So start your practice as you mean to go on, ethically and matching what it is that you want out of it.
Yeah, and I would say that when you get into the work situation, if for those of you who go on to get paid work, you may find that you have in-house supervision and that's it. You may have, and that is the way of the world. A lot of ex-students have commented that they had quite a good luxury of choosing their supervisor as students, but when they went into practice, they were allocated one. It was like, this is who your supervisor is going to be. So sometimes having a supervisor attached to the practice kind of echoes how that is in the real world. However, as Ken said, I think that we're going to have a more clear guideline from the BACP as time moves on.
For certain. So the next thing to maybe look at is the policies and procedures of the organisation that you're going to be working in. Certainly on the ABC awarding body, which is here in the UK, when you write your final portfolio, your final piece of work to become a qualified counsellor, you're going to be referring to the policies and procedures of the organisation you work in. So it's maybe an idea to check what is in place as you start that journey. How do they run it? What are they legitimate, I guess is the way of putting it. Have they thought through all of these really important things? And again, and linked into that, insurance. How does insurance work? Now, I know, Rory, you got quite a strong feeling on the old insurance when you're in placement. Share that strong feeling with us.
Oh yes, yeah. I with my avoidant, dismissive attachment style. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's I'm okay, you're not okay position. Yeah. I'm a great believer, and if any of my learners are listening to this now, they'll be saying, "Oh, he's on it again." We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. I can hear the groans now. And I always say to my learners, if a placement says we've got our own insurance, you don't have to have your own, say that's lovely, and then go and buy your own insurance.
Yeah.
Two insurances are kind of indemnity insurance, professional indemnity insurance. So if a client brings a complaint against you because you've acted, in their mind, unethically, then you may have to defend that, and that's why you need insurance. The other is accident insurance. If a client trips over the carpet as they're leaving your therapy room and then ends up with a broken arm, that should be the organisation's responsibility. They should have their own accident insurance, so check that out. But if they do offer you, they say, "Oh no, we've got professional indemnity insurance," say thank you very much, but I'll have my own. It is about £50 or £60 a year, depending on who you go with. But it's so important. And I always tell a bit of a horror story about a case I heard a good few years ago now, where there was a student in a placement, was practicing, was told that the organisation had their own insurance cover. A complaint was made. It needed a legal view, which costs money. So the student said to the placement, "Can you activate the insurance so that I can, get my defence team and things?" And the placement said, "No."
Yeah.
Basically, "No, we don't want to do that. It's our insurance and we'll activate it if we want to."
Great lesson there.
Great lesson
Yeah.
there. So buy your own insurance, and it's just so important. We live in a more litigious society, and by that I mean that people will go to law to sort things out than ever before. And it is a when I signed up to the BACP's charter, their new charter, I have to show that I've got indemnity insurance. My own indemnity insurance. And Ken has his own indemnity.
Oh, yes. It's your practice from the moment you step in, so look after your practice. I can't say that strongly enough. You'll hear me saying that again and again and again. It's not the agency's practice. It is yours. From your very first hour to the very last hour that you counsel, it is your practice. How are you going to run your practice? Have a look at your placement opportunity to what support they have for you. They may have some additional training. Make sure that that's going to meet the modality of counselling that you're learning, but it may be training related to the area that you're working in. You may be working for an organisation like Help the Aged, and they may give you some training on where seniors might be within their frame of reference that could be helpful for you. So have a look. Is there some training on offer there for you?
Yeah, and good placements will have access to really, really high quality training. And if you stay on after you've qualified, and the other thing that some placements will ask you is what can you contribute to them? And by that, they will say that they're giving you the opportunity to get your hours, but when you qualify, would you stay on maybe for another year as a qualified counsellor? And a good agency should provide in-house training, really should.
In closing on this is really, really important, and I'm really repeating what I learned from you, Rory. Here's the thing: when you're going into a placement, you may be tempted to kind of put your hat in your hand and feel like they're doing you a favour, and walk gingerly and be so grateful for this massive opportunity that they are affording you. It's the other way around, and I'll tell you why. You are studying, you are at the leading edge of what's happening in psychotherapy, in counselling. You're learning it now. It is fresh with you. You are eager and you're excited to go out there and apply what you are learning. They're getting a great asset in that. So believe in yourself and have confidence in who you are and what you have to deliver.
Absolutely. It's a 50-50 collaborative kind of adventure. They're offering you a placement. What you're offering is the latest, as Ken said, cutting edge and really relevant information in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. And hey, isn't that information changing on a regular basis? We're learning more and more and more about the human condition. So people who are going into practice are probably better educated than they ever have been. Well, that sounds like we've wrapped it up, Ken. It's been another exciting podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So much in it. And as I always like to say to my trainees and to everybody, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.